policy issues get crowded out by other shiny objects. But I would put Trump's McDonald stunt in that category.
You're trying to talk about minimum wage, this actual issue that's impacting the workers,
Yes.
and instead you get in this kind of like optics arguments, right? All right, and I'm here with Catherine Rampell. She's a syndicated opinion columnist at the Washington Post on economy and other issues. She's also an economic and political commentator for CNN and a special correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. She's been getting spicy with my buddy Scott Jennings on the cable panels. We'll get to that in a minute. But welcome back to the podcast. How you doing, Catherine?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. We need to do a periodic economic check-in, and you've been doing such good work lately. And you had at the Post this week a little test that people were taking, where you can go to we'll put the link in the show notes here, and people can go, test out whether they're more aligned with Kamala Harris or Donald Trump on policy. I guess people listening to this podcast probably know the answer to that already, but it seems you got some interesting results. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what we did was we got a bunch of data from YouGov, the polling organization, that had run blind surveys effectively on like 130 different policies from either of the candidates or both of the candidates, or in some cases, neither of them, where basically they asked people to rate how much they agreed with them without knowing which candidate had proposed them. And then separately, they asked people to evaluate the policies again, guessing which candidate had embraced them. And the results were super interesting. Among other top-line findings, we found that Kamala Harris's policy agenda is actually way more popular than Trump's. Again, in a blind test, people don't know who proposed what. So almost all of her policy agenda is above water. Majority of the population supports almost all of her ideas. For Trump, it's about half of his ideas have majority support, which is actually better than I expected. We had done YouGov had done a similar, smaller scale version of this back when Biden was on the ballot. I want to say early summer. And in that case, almost all of Trump's policies were below water. So Trump did better, but still not as bad.
Well, he's added in a few kind of a few gimmies, a few giveaways. He's stealing from the Democratic playbook a little bit here down the stretch.
Yeah, like he's had sort of a Panderpalooza recently, or an Oprah-esque spirit. You get a tax cut, and you get a tax cut, and you get a tax cut. And so, in fact, his most popular idea across his entire agenda was making Social Security benefits tax-free. So, as an aside, just because an idea is popular does not mean that it is a good, meritorious idea. Whether we're talking about Social Security benefits or other things that not making them tax-free anyway, or other things that I think are sort of politically, economically foolish, like tariffs poll relatively well. We can talk about that, I guess, later in the program. And I do not think that Trump's universal tariff idea is a good one for all sorts of reasons. So, just because people like something doesn't mean that it is substantively meritorious. But if we're just talking about like what voters prefer, they are much more on board with Harris's agenda. And then we broke down the questions, the policies by topic, by issue. So like there is a bunch of economic ideas and a bunch of healthcare ideas and a bunch of foreign policy ideas to see if there were relative strengths or weaknesses between the candidates. And in that case, Harris does best on pretty much everything. On the economy, immigration, and foreign policy, they're like roughly tied. But even things like crime, people vastly prefer Harris's agenda to Trump, which is pretty striking considering if you ask people in the abstract, which candidate do you trust more on crime or guns, they say Trump, or a higher share say Trump. But then if you look at what what ideas they like Harris's, but part of the problem is they don't know whose ideas are whose.
Yeah, part of this is messaging, and this gets more into my space. But like the Democrats, I've been saying for a while, the Democrats are scared if they just ran on '90s Democratic guns and crime policy. Like, I feel like they would be in a pretty good position. Those are popular issues, and they're to steal your word, generally meritorious. You know, and so I feel like they've let themselves get defined by members of their coalition that maybe have policy ideas that aren't as popular.
I don't. You may be right. I don't think that's the primary problem here for
Okay.
Harris. Um, so, like, a lot of her ideas that poll super well are things like universal background checks, universal mental health and criminal background checks for guns, or having a national database to track police misconduct, or I'm trying to remember what else was there. Oh, like career training and substance abuse programs for former prisoners. Like things that are, I don't know if exactly those versions were on the platform in the 90s, but like maybe you would consider them more liberal. I don't know. But they are not particularly salient in this election.
Yeah.
And I think that,
High popularity, low salience.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that there are kind of two issues here. One is that Harris and her Democratic surrogates have not done a great job communicating to the public what she stands for. And, the examples that I just gave are ones that probably, if you looked at the data, like people are relatively able to code those as Democratic. But a lot of her other ideas that people really like, that are sort of more law and ordery ideas, maybe this is harkening back to the
Yeah.
90s. Um, People don't realize are hers. So like her most popular uh, policy, actually the most popular policy across our entire data set was a border security measure. It had to do with investing in new technology to detect fentanyl and
Mm,
other drugs at the border. Yeah, I think 90% of voters, registered voters, liked that idea. But almost everybody thought it was Trump's. Like,
right.
because it's border security, it's drugs, it's law and order. And so they associate it with him. And she has not been able to sort of escape the branding that Republicans have placed on her as like open borders, lawlessness, all that good stuff. So I think it's partly, it's not so much the ideas they're proposing; it's like partly their ability to communicate them. And then, frankly, I think a large a large reason for this failure of voters to understand who stands for what has to do with media coverage. It's just that policy issues like always get crowded out. Um, usually they get subordinated to horse race coverage. This is always my complaint. I write primarily about policy, and like every election cycle, I'm like, why don't people care about the
Yeah.
issues? And it's just, that's what gets covered is the polls. Um, and I think that's partly reflecting audience preferences, but it's also just like it's much easier for journalists to write about horse race than to write about the issues, especially if it's not your specialty. Like if you're a political reporter, getting into the nitty gritty of the tax code or how insurance markets work or whatever, it's just like it's hard and you don't have time to do it on deadline. So it's partly about that. That's an ever present issue, and it's especially difficult to get policies into like onto the front page right now with Trump in the race.
Yeah.
So like as an example, um, this project that we are talking about that I did with my colleague Yo-Yo Joe on what the candidates' policy agendas and who stands for what and how little people know about it. I was going to talk about it in on CNN last night and this morning, and
Trump likes
ironic.
Nazis. Yeah.
Yes, and now Trump, now everything is Trump and Nazis, which I'm not suggesting should not be covered, right? Like
Yeah.
like that's a very important headline. And all of the stuff that's come out from John Kelly is really damning and is important for the future of our republic, that voters know it. But it also means that it's another news cycle about Trump craziness. And I guess there's some like tangential policy issues related, like you don't want fascism. Um, but we're still not hearing about what his other policies are, let alone Kamala Harris and her ideas.
Sure.
So it's just been very difficult um, to get the airtime to talk about this. And I think a lot of people blame voters. Like people are like, oh, voters say that they need to know more about Kamala Harris, and how can they say that? Like, isn't there more than enough information? And it's partly that the media doesn't really give it to them,
Yeah.
or at least doesn't prioritize it.
Well, we're going to get to the Trump liking Nazis part in segment 3, in the Scott Jennings segment 3. I do. Just one. I saw a poll yesterday. Blueprint. Those guys, Blueprint. We've done some coverage of their message testing polls, which I think are pretty good. And they were looking at 18 to 29-year-old men, boys, we might call them, who don't know anything. So if you have an 18 to 29-year-old male in your life who's like on the fence, doesn't think there's any difference between the two candidates, this is a good quiz to send them. Like you say, you care about the policies, take the quiz, see how it turns out.
Yes, I should say, in
Yeah.
addition to our findings about what other voters believe about the policies, our Washington Post piece, my piece with Yo-Yo, allows people to take a quiz
Yeah.
so that they can see in a blind test which candidate they align with more on what
Take
policies.
the quiz. Send it to the 18 to 29-year-old male in your life who's deciding what to do in the election still. As far as specific policy issues, we can do that here. We can get serious. You wrote recently about a Flint, a test policy in Flint that the Harris campaign is looking at taking nationwide, which is essentially just a direct cash transfer to families, people having newborns. Talk a little bit about the policy and what we've seen as far as the results, and whether there is anything that could be scaled there.
Yeah. So we already have at the national level a child tax credit.
Sure.
It's been around for decades, usually with bipartisan support, although has become more partisan in recent years. And during the first year of Biden's administration, Democrats expanded it to make it refundable, meaning that even if you have very low earnings or zero earnings, you can still get this essentially cash for having a child. That expired. The expanded version expired. And Kamala Harris has said not only would she increase the existing level of the tax credit to be what it was under the American Rescue Plan, but in addition, she would give every family with a newborn $6,000 cash, maybe available in some kind of monthly installment or whatever, not just at tax time. So that's the idea. I was talking with people on the campaign, like, where did you come up with the $6,000 figure? Is it like based on some calculation of what it costs for a newborn baby, with the strollers and diapers or whatever? And I was told actually it was inspired by this program in Flint. Flint, Michigan, is obviously not a place that would usually be used as a role model for good government policy.
Right.
um,
We're not taking the pipes nationwide. We're not taking the Flint pipes nationwide.
Yes. Although, Flint was the site of this major water crisis where lead was leaching into the water, poisoning the residents, including children, and they ultimately have fixed most of it. And actually, while I was there in Flint to write about the baby bonus program, incidentally, the EPA rolled out a lead pipe replacement regulation nationwide. And so the people in Flint were like, yeah, we're so proud that our crisis means that, this is hopefully not going to be an issue in other states. So Flint, not normally a poster child for government failure. Actually, the same woman who exposed the Flint lead water crisis a decade ago, her name is Dr. Mona Hanna. She's the person who came up with this $6,000 baby bonus program. She's like incredible. She's one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. Everybody in town knows her as Dr. Mona. And basically, she's a pediatrician. And she said for many years she was very frustrated by the fact that a lot of her patients' various problems were related to public health issues. and that like, she'd see kids with breathing problems or asthma, and she's like, well, I think you just probably need like better living conditions, but that costs money. Or you need better nutrition, but that costs money.
Sure.
The way that she put it to me was, she for a really long time she wished she had something in her doctor's bag that could just prescribe away poverty. And so basically that's what she decided to do. She was presented with this grant opportunity to come up with a new program, and she said, what if we just like gave every family, not contingent on income, $6,000 on the occasion of having a baby. I guess it's $500 a month for the first year. So $6,000. And people can use it however they like. Um, I guess in theory, they could use it to buy a flat screen TV or whatever, if they really wanted to. But in practice, I talked with a lot of moms in Flint, and they're like, oh my God, babies are so expensive. You have to get the stroller and the car seat and the diapers and
Yeah.
the wipes and the formula bottles and whatever. So people can use it however they like, um, which, some people like and some people don't like. The traditional Milton Friedman version of this is like, would be much better to just give people cash to do what they want with stuff. He was sort of a well-known proponent of a negative income tax or a
Yeah.
basic income, um,
Yeah,
and that is an idea.
get the like local bureaucrats out of the system. Like you got
Right.
to go to some office in Flint, you got to wait in line and fill out paperwork and just cut all that out.
Yes, and in Flint, it is very administratively light.
Yeah,
So basically, you have to prove that you live in Flint. You don't have to prove any level of income. Like I said, it's universal, but Flint is a very low income place.
sure.
It's like it has, I think, the highest child poverty rate in the nation, or among the highest child poverty rates. So it's very, very low income. You're not going to see a lot of like billionaires getting the $6,000 baby bonus there. Um, and and then the actual cash benefits are administered by Give Directly, which is a well-known global nonprofit that does cash transfers. So people get the money through a debit card, they get it through their direct deposit in their bank account, and then they use it as they like. It's early days. They have, I want to say, like about 1,000 families enrolled, but the early results of the program are promising. They have lower rates of smoking in the third trimester for pregnant moms, fewer cases of very low birth weight births, um, and better nutritional access. And then they also asked people about sort of softer questions, more subjective things that you might not think of as like traditional metrics, like do you feel loved? Do you feel respected? Do you have hope? Um, and so, I think the argument for those who are running this pilot is that this is not just about the material needs of these families, but it's also like about rethinking the social contract, and that you want people to feel like the community supports your decision to have a child, and is supporting your ability to make ends meet. And so it's some of it's like this sort of traditional metrics like birth weight. Some of it's about how much do you trust government institutions, where again, in Flint in particular, people really do not trust government institutions and the healthcare system. So then the question
Yeah.
is, how much does any of this scale up to the country? Like I said, Kamala Harris, her campaign has sort of used this as a template of sorts, or at least the baby bonus part. And in terms of administrative likeness, keeping the bureaucrats out of your business and letting you spend the money as you see fit, that's obviously the same, or very similar. One difference is that, again, Flint is a very low income population and relative to the rest of the country, whereas if
Right.
you expanded this nationwide, it would be available to lots of families higher up the income.
Yuppies. Yeah.
It's basically the same eligibility criteria as the current child
Got
tax
it.
credit, which goes up. I think you can get the full amount up to $400,000 of income or
Yeah,
something
got
like
it.
that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so somebody should check that before you
Well, I
before
think
you
the other good news
make
about
tax
this
decisions.
is for the small percentage of pro-lifers who have demonstrated that they're motivated by the health and well-being of the child and not by hatred of women.
Hmm.
We could have the opening for a future compromise, the prenatal
Oh,
health cash. So there's
absolutely.
something there.
And actually, in Michigan, they are now expanding the program to a few other areas, including to some quite conservative areas
Yeah,
in the Upper Peninsula. And there have been Republican pro-life lawmakers who are very much behind it.
yeah.
So I agree. I think, as I said, the child tax credit in general historically had a lot of bipartisan support. I think there is an opportunity for um, more conservative pro-lifers to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and say we actually want to make it easier for people to raise kids, not just force them to have birth, but like actually be
Right.
supportive of the babies that result from that birth, and giving people cash to help them pay for diapers or whatever they see fit when the baby is born is a really great way to demonstrate that. At the national level, I think the jury's still out on how much actual investment uh, Republican senators and congressmen
I
will
think
make in
that's a
this.
very judicious and kind way to put it. Hey, all, if you are in the market for a pant that is, Zoom friendly and comfortable in our modern age, I've got a new sponsor for you. It is Public Rec, which has developed the revolutionary Daymaker pant that feels as comfortable as sweats, but look and fit like tailored pants. They're super stretchy and made with an elastic waistband, but you can wear them absolutely anywhere. Wear them lounging around the house eating Cheetos or football Sundays with the boys. You can even wear them out to a lunch and nobody will even notice you're wearing sweats. You can finally have indoor comfort with outdoor style by wearing Public Rec's Daymaker pants. For a limited time only, our listeners get 20% off their entire order when you use code BULWARK at publicrec.com. That's 20% off your order at publicrec.com with promo code BULWARK. Here's the thing, I'm sitting around the house all day, but I don't want to look like a total schlub when I'm going to school pickup or if I'm, going to meet a friend for coffee. And so you got to find this balance, right, between my skinny jeans that we're usually talking about and, the Hoosier rec shorts that I wear around the house. And that right balance has been found for me with Public Rec's Daymaker pant. With Daymaker pants, you get to select the exact width and length you need. Whether you're a 30 by 32 or 44 by 36, you can find your perfect fitting pants. They come in 10 unique colors from navy to dark olive to stone gray. Their proprietary blend of materials provide the perfect combination of breathability and stretch. Stop the suffering in regular pants. For a limited time, our listeners get 20% off when you use code THEBULWARK at checkout. That's 20% off with code THEBULWARK at publicrec.com. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Say goodbye to pants that put up a fight, because when comfort meets style, you found Public Rec. Hey, y'all, if you love this podcast and want to listen to all Bulwark podcasts ad-free, join Bulwark Plus today. You can click the link in this description. You'll get the best politics newsletters in the business, and you can become a Bulwark Plus member right now. We'd appreciate it. I want to talk about a different article that you've written recently, several, about how the economy is doing, to use your phrase, spectacularly well. We could go through all the stats, but we've done that. I don't know how much value is in that. The more interesting thing I want to get from you, since you've kind of followed this stuff day to day more closely than I do, I do think that there is a lack of appreciation for the expectations beat on the economic landing here. I know that occasionally Joe Biden likes to tweet about it, and maybe that was just kind of a the fallout from his communications failings, but just a remarkable results for where the economy is right now versus where all the experts thought it would be 12, 18, 24 months ago.
So I will start my answer with the caveat that counterfactuals are really hard, and they're especially hard to communicate to the public.
Sure.
Like telling people well, it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Just trust
Right.
me, is not always the
We
most
could have had
convincing message.
hyperinflation,
Yes,
it could,
exactly. Could have had a depression. So it is a really hard thing to communicate, but you are absolutely right that uh, the economy has beaten like all expectations in the sense that we are not only doing better than had been projected a year or so ago when there had been widespread fears of recession, not just among like Republicans wishing for a bad economy to make the election harder for Democrats. I feel like there's this like people on the left are like, oh, it was just all of this like propaganda telling you that the economy was going to fail to help Trump or whatever. That's not true. Like Wall Street analysts whose job it is to get forecasts right were predicting overwhelmingly recession not very long ago. And with good reason. Usually, when there is a period of high inflation in American history, or recent history anyway, it has been followed by a recession. That did not happen. Knock on wood, it will not happen anytime soon. I think because of some judicious decisions by the Federal Reserve, which they largely don't get credit for, also among people on the left. Um, so not only did we
that is not true here. We have a little Powell. If we win this election, is going to be in a little sculpture garden with Mark Cuban and Liz Cheney. We're crowdfunding for it right now.
okay. Yeah, it's funny. It's like the Jay Powell is seems to be sort of a villain among a lot of progressives, which I don't understand. It's like if we get a soft landing, yes, he should get a Medal of Honor
Yeah.
award. Any event. So not only did we escape that fate so far, we're actually doing better as an economy than had even been predicted before the recession happened, before the pandemic happened, I should
Hmm.
say. So if you look at where the Congressional Budget Office or the International Monetary Fund thought the US economy would be in 2024, when they made their forecasts in like January of 2020, we have more jobs and higher output than in higher wages than had been forecast. So which is unusual and bizarre because obviously we went through this horrible pandemic recession, which you would think we would still have some scars from. The rest of the world basically does. We don't, and you can debate why that is, and I think the answer is not quite clear. But either way, we're
American
doing very well.
exceptionalism, I think, is the answer.
I guess. I mean, it's also the rest of the world has also had more, or most of the developed world, I should say, has had more exposure to the war in Ukraine and a bunch of other things. In any event, we're doing a lot better than had been forecast, and on almost every metric, things look very good, except for the one, which is I know a little bit like asking. Other than that, how was the play, Mrs.
Yeah.
Lincoln, about inflation? And inflation has cooled a lot. It was obviously quite high. In much of the rest of the developed world, it was higher. It has been higher, again, partly because of the war in Ukraine. But either way, it was painful in the United States. It has cooled a lot. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the general public about what is supposed to happen to prices now. Economists are looking for price growth to slow. So that means prices don't go up as quickly now as they did a couple of years ago. The general public has been looking for prices to fall. That's a different thing, right? That's like the best way to analogize this maybe is as a car, right? The car is going to continue moving forward. It's going to move forward more slowly. It's going to decelerate. It's not going to move backwards,
Right.
which is a really tricky concept to get people to understand. Just like counterfactuals are hard, understanding price growth and price levels is also really hard too. So people are still ticked off about the fact that, a night out costs a lot more. A night out at a restaurant costs a lot more than it used to. The grocery bill costs a lot more than it used to. Now, of course, over time, like everything costs more than it used to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. more or less, with some exceptions, like actually for flat screen TVs. Um, but basically the price level goes up. It's just that people have more time to acclimate to prices going up than has been the case in the last few years. So I think people are still reasonably frustrated and ticked off that they were like going to the grocery store and it's still relatively fresh in their mind how much milk used to cost or how much a pound of beef used to cost. And they just need to get used to it. And I think part of the reason you may have seen some improvement in consumer sentiment in sort of these softer measures of how people feel about the economy is that they're just getting used to it, which is going to happen eventually. Again, price growth has slowed. Wages are outpacing price growth, and that's been the case for over a year now. So people aren't like, super enthusiastic about the economy, but I think they're less pissed off. And I think, among other things, that means the gap between consumer views of the economy and those like more traditional metrics is shrinking. But also, it's probably going to be less of a problem for the incumbent party. I don't think the economy is ever going to be like a winning issue for Kamala Harris, but it may be less of a problem than it has been.
Got your lips to God's ears. Okay. We need to close with our friend Scott Jennings. Well, I guess we have two Scott Jennings items. My former colleague, he gets a little testy. He got a little testy with Sarah Longwell. Got a little testy with you. I don't know if there's any trends there that we could notice. But I wanted to play one clip of an exchange you guys had after Donald Trump's McDonald stunt. Let's take a listen.
I think it's an unfair attack on Trump, this minimum wage worker issue. Because
McDonald's is not the only employer in America. You know that, right? Like there are lots of other
lot of service jobs. Am I arguing that they are?
But shouldn't he be able to answer?
You sat here and attacked him for attacking minimum wage workers because he went to McDonald's, and I just wanted to point out how wrong you were.
She did not do that.
I didn't attack him for going to McDonald's. I attacked him for his actual record, which is bad for the workers of McDonald's.
But the reason you're sitting here is because he went to McDonald's.
The reason I'm sitting here is because I write on economic policy and I know something about the economic policy.
I guess this is where I need to be clear. She's sitting here because she actually knows things about.
But did you?
Eek. What you had another one with IVF. You're fighting a good fight in there, but give us a little behind the scenes. Like what do we think? Like what's happening?
So what's happening here? I think I like Scott, actually. I feel like a lot of people after that exchange sent me a bunch of notes like, yeah, beat that guy down. I'm like, no, I like Scott. I think he sticks pretty closely to the party talking points.
Yeah.
And that's part of his job, as a Republican strategist type. As a surrogate on CNN, I don't. Really
it's a little weird to be a surrogate for somebody that you didn't like and thought that you were. I could go back and play some old clips of Scott or any like 95% of these people talking about how awful Donald Trump is.
Well,
but
look,
anyway.
I don't. Yes, I mean you'll have to talk with him about how much he embraces Trump now versus as being a loyal foot soldier. I don't know. I haven't asked.
It is doing well for his speaking fees. I know you're an economics reporter, so I don't know if that's part of your remit or part of your beat, but it is.
I will say I think that one broader takeaway from that exchange is that how I was saying earlier that policy issues get crowded out by other shiny objects.
Yes, this is a great point. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, shiny objects is almost too dismissive for like the Trump Nazi stuff, but I would put Trump's McDonald's stunt in that category.
You're trying to talk about minimum wage, this actual issue that's impacting the workers, and instead you get in this kind of like optics argument, right?
Right. So I think what Scott was trying to say, to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
I think he was saying like, we're here to talk about his McDonald's stunt. You're here to comment on the McDonald's stunt. And I'm saying, and my view of my role on these shows, among other places, other venues, is not so much to talk about the stunt, but to talk about how that fits in or contradicts the actual things that the candidates stand for. And as I said, you didn't play it, but I said, Kamala Harris has done similar stunts in the past.
Sure.
I mean, you can call it a stunt, or you can call it like camaraderie with the working man or whatever. Like it's a tried and true tradition for politicians to do one of these, like, work a day in the life of a common man,
Sure.
traditional voter, somebody doing a
Yeah, but
menial
usually
job,
then when you get asked a
whatever.
question about like, and then Trump is like asked the question about the minimum wage and what these workers' lives are like, and he just has no substantive answer at all. It's just
Right.
like
So
words.
that's what that was the context for that exchange as well. So, the setup for that topic on the show was Trump did this stunt. People want to talk about this stunt. Scott's point was like, oh, why are Democrats so mad about Trump doing this stunt? And I was trying to say, I don't care that he did this stunt. I think this was like the most normal thing that Trump has done in months. Way more normal to like do a photo op at McDonald's than to praise Nazi generals, or like give a tax break to everyone who comes into your peripheral vision. But I care much more about how the optics of this fit into what he's actually proposed. So I mentioned, he won't say whether actually at that McDonald's stunt, he was asked about his support for raising the minimum wage, and he would not answer. In past contexts, he has been, more clearly opposed to it. Minimum wage, for those listening, hasn't been raised since 2009. He also cut funding for OSHA, which is the regulatory agency that does workplace safety inspections, which will affect the lives of McDonald's workers, of course. Under Trump, likewise, his National Labor Relations Board made it harder to hold McDonald's accountable if their franchisees commit wage theft, etc. So I was talking about all of that. And Scott was saying, well, none of that has to do with like this McDonald's stuff. And I was saying, yes, it does. And my role is to talk about it because I cover economic policy. So that's my more charitable.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad we got to have it all out. I don't really know about this. Is, I guess, not really your business, and I guess I'm quasi work for a competitor. Not that I really care, but I'm an MSNBC analyst. But like the new CNN thing, it has been good for viral clips, but like these 5-person panels are not particularly conducive to having extended conversations about OSHA. And the impact on McDonald's workers, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say
it can be hard to get that in. Like,
all right. Lastly, on we already talked to Jeffrey Goldberg about his story about John Kelly, but I wanted to play again Scott talking about it last night, but also in the context of something that you've written about lately as a Jewish person, as a Jewish columnist, about kind of these questions about invoking Hitler and how appropriate it is or how inappropriate it is in the context of Trump. But let's listen to Jennings one more time.
I think, first of all, I don't know John Kelly, but I agree. I think he's an honorable person. His family and his son certainly made the ultimate sacrifice for the country, so he certainly earned an opinion here. And he's earned a political opinion, but I think, like everything else with Donald Trump, opinions vary, whether you're coming out of the military or the private sector or government or anything else. And I agree that 2 weeks before an election will cause some people to look at this in a jaundiced way, like, you're trying to drop this here at the end, and there will be people who don't believe it. There will be people who refute it, and Donald Trump himself also refutes it. I would just humbly submit to Mr. Kelly that if he's worried about Hitler and he's worried about fascism, he ought to pick up the newspaper. There's thousands of Hitlers running around this country right now, running around college campuses, running around New York City, chasing Jewish people around, blocking their access on college campuses. If you're worried about Hitler and you're talking about Donald Trump, maybe open your eyes and take in what's happening on the American left in this country. Those are the Hitlers I'm worried about.
So, Catherine, 2-point question. Are you more concerned about fascism coming from the Republican nominee for president who's tied in the polls or from a college sophomore at Columbia? And part two, what do you just think about the broader kind of discourse around Trump's rhetoric on Hitler and issues such as this?
I'm pretty much against Hitler in any form. I know that's a really controversial take. Don't think it's great when there's anti-Semitism on the left or the right, and I've had it targeted at me from both directions in the past week, among other weeks of my life. But
same, and I'm not even Jewish. That's just the gift that Elon Musk has given us on Twitter now, where it's just totally free to make those kinds
actually
of
there are
stories.
some Jewish Millers out there.
I know, that must be it, or something. I don't know about that. Just like my face.
I don't know. You're in the media, and we control.
Yeah, I went to
all,
GW too. Who knows? And I'm in the media. There are a lot of potential clues there, but no, I'm Gentile for all my trolls.
Yeah. So not good. However, yeah, I'm much less worried about a college student who is not given the office of leader of the free world and commander in chief of our military, espousing anti-Semitic comments. Again, don't like it.
Yeah.
But much more worried about someone who is a major party candidate for president, who potentially has all of the powers of the state at his disposal and has beyond that, like seemingly deliberately echoed a lot of the Hitler rhetoric. Like, as I wrote about this a few weeks ago, but as a columnist, political pundit, whatever you want to call me, I never want to be the one tripping Godwin's law. Godwin's law is this idea that as an internet conversation goes on, the probability that someone invokes Hitler or the Nazis approaches one. Like, everything devolves into like, oh, well, if you disagree with me, you're just a Nazi. Like, you don't want to be part of that rhetorical problem. However, it has become sort of inescapable with Trump. Like, even before this thing came out from Jeffrey Goldberg, where Trump literally praised German Nazis as being super loyal, which is sort of funny in a way for other reasons, because they were notoriously not loyal, but also they were Nazis. So either loyalty or not, probably don't want to hold them up as role models. But I wrote a few weeks ago about like his use of the word vermin to describe his political enemies, his descriptions of immigrants and other disfavored groups as people who were not only coming to eat your pets, but rape and murder your daughters, and lots of other things that, as someone whose ancestors fled pogroms, are very troubling. As I put in that piece, I don't know that he and J.D. Vance, are like deliberately trying to start a pogrom against, for example, Haitian immigrants in Springfield. But if they were, I don't know what they would be doing differently.
Right.
And so that is very troubling and upsetting. And even if you are an undergrad at, name a random liberal arts school in America, and you're
Wellesley
marching, sure, doing your encampments to criticize Zionists or whatever, like, you're not going to have the ability to rally millions of Americans behind you to, put in danger the people you are demonizing. Like, it was interesting at the time also when I wrote this, that Vance was saying that Democrats, by calling Trump a fascist, were causing political violence. Meanwhile, I denounce political violence in any way, shape, or form. But of course, Trump does have this coterie of Secret Service agents around him at all times. They're saying much more inflammatory things about very vulnerable immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, among other places, who, of course, do not have that level of protection. So anyway, this was all very upsetting to me at the time, and I wrote about it then. And I remember getting a lot of pushback, like, "Oh, you're part of the problem." Meanwhile, a few weeks later, of course, Trump is praising Rommel.
So. Yeah, no matter what. No matter how low that you think an accusation could be about Donald Trump, you will always meet it. And yes. In the spirit of your media criticism that we can't get into serious policy issues because we don't have enough time, so we have to talk about things such as this, I did not get to the McKinley tariff. So if people want to learn, that's okay. We don't have time. If people want to learn more, there's an amazing Bulwark article today about how it's called Trump loves the 1890s, but he's clueless about them. That tells you what actually happened with the McKinley tariff. We'll put it in the show notes. Go check it out. Thank you so much to Catherine Rampell. After the election, we're going to do tariffs. We're going to do OSHA. We're just going to nerd out. All right. I can't wait. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks.